Ananda Gudvajsnava Nindaki, al ære til de samlede hengivne, al ære til de samlede hengivne, al ære til de samlede hengivne, al ære til Sri Sri Gurungrang, al ære til Sri Prabhupada, Vishnupadaya, Vishnupadaya, Bhutale, Srimate, Bhaktivedanta Swami, Namaste, Saraswata Devi, So how do you prefer we conduct this? You can either do it in a lecture form or like Mr. Ghosty.
What is more
discussion?
That would be
questions and
maybe a little presentation and then little discussion?
Yeah. So I can read a verse and then very shortly just and then we can discuss. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Reading from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, Transcendental Knowledge, text 34. Tadvidi pranipatena pariprasnena sevaya upadekshyanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadashina. Anyone want to try?
Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you, for they have seen the truth.
Very good, but I can make the Sanskrit still.
I can try that too.
Okay.
Tatvidi pariprasnena patena, and then pariprasnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadashina.
Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. Purport. The path of spiritual realization is undoubtedly difficult. The Lord therefore advises us to approach a bona fide spiritual master in the line of disciplic succession from the Lord himself. No one can be a bona fide spiritual master without following the principles of disciplic succession. The Lord is the original spiritual master, and the person in disciplic succession can convey the message of the Lord as it is to his disciple. No one can be spiritually realized by manufacturing his own process, as it is the fashion of the foolish pretenders. The Bhagavatam 6.3.19 says, Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam. The path of religion is directly enunciated by the Lord. Therefore, mental speculation or dry arguments cannot help lead one to the right path. Nor by independent study of books of knowledge can one progress in spiritual life. One has to approach a bona fide spiritual master to receive the knowledge. Such a spiritual master should be accepted in full surrender, and one should serve the spiritual master like a menial servant without false prestige. Satisfaction of the self-realized spiritual master is the secret of advancement in spiritual life. Inquiries and submission constitute the proper combination of spiritual understanding. Inquiries and submission constitute the proper combination for spiritual understanding. Unless there is submission and service, inquiries from the learned spiritual master will not be effective. One must be able to pass the test of the spiritual master, and when he sees the genuine desire of the disciple, he automatically blesses the disciple with genuine spiritual understanding. In this verse, both blind following and absurd inquiries are condemned. Not only should one hear submissively from the spiritual master, but one must also get a clear understanding from him in submission and service and inquiries. A bona fide spiritual master is by nature very kind toward the disciple. Therefore, when the student is submissive and always ready to render service, the reciprocation of knowledge and inquiries becomes perfect. So this is, as we all know, the great secret in spiritual life, that if you want to make any progress whatsoever, this is the essence. This is really the only way to do it. Without this, it is not possible. Actually, it's said, there's one quote, Prabhu says, without having a spiritual master, one cannot go back to Godhead. So that's the way it's set up. Krishna says in 4.2, Evam Parampara Praptam Imam Raja Suyudam Sakali Liha Mahata Yoga Nashtapanantapa. That somehow out of this knowledge was lost, and now Krishna comes and give it again in the disciplic chain, in the disciplic succession, because it was lost. So Krishna, he gives the knowledge, the whole knowledge is given by Krishna, and he gives it to Brahma, and Brahma gives it to Narada Muni, gives it all the way down to Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada gave it to us, and we are trying to give it on. So this is the disciplic succession. The famous example Prabhupada uses about the postman delivering a letter. So he just gives a letter. He doesn't change the letter. And maybe even sometimes there's money in the letter, so he doesn't take any of the money, hopefully. Or even put more money. He just delivers it as it is. So that's why, of course, Prabhupada called it Bhagavad Gita as it is. So that's the bona fide spiritual master. He's a representative, he's like a diplomat for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So because he has understood the purpose of Krishna, he can deliver it. So that's what we see all over Bhagavad Gita, that Prabhupada, he understands the purpose of Krishna. We wrote something of a purport last Saturday in 369, I think that's, where Prabhupada says, 329, where Prabhupada says, men who are ignorant cannot appreciate activities in Krishna consciousness, and therefore Lord Krishna advises us not to disturb them and simply waste valuable time. So Krishna says, don't disturb them. If they're ignorant, don't disturb them. Don't teach them, don't preach. But devotees of the Lord are more kind than the Lord, because they understand the purpose of the Lord. Consequently, they undertake all kind of risk, even to the point of approaching ignorant men to try to engage them in the act of Krishna consciousness, which are absolutely necessary for the human being. So even though Krishna says don't disturb them, and he says in Bhagavad Gita, don't disturb the ignorant, don't try to sway them from the path. If they are absorbed in their work, don't try to stop them in their work. You will simply disturb them. And he says, in essence, don't waste your time. Preach to the devotees. So don't waste your time preaching to people who are too ignorant. And then what Prabhupada does all the time, he says, you have to give this to others. And Prabhupada himself, by his example, gave it constantly to everyone. Whoever was just a little reciprocation, Prabhupada immediately embraced this person. And you know, Prabhupada started the whole movement with hippies, and that had no real qualification. But Prabhupada gave them the qualification. By the great association of Srila Prabhupada, he lifted them from completely down in the deep ignorance up to the Sudha Sattva. So that's the nature of an empowered spiritual master. That he's a chintamani, he's a touchstone. There's something called Maidurya, meaning like he's like a wish-fulfilling stone. Wherever he comes in contact with, he works, he acts like a wish-fulfilling stone. So that's the real spiritual master. That he, as we are here, he has seen the truth, so he can deliver it, he can give it to others. But there's conditions here. Here it has to be, one has to approach them with a submissive attitude. And then pranipata and pariprashna and sevaya. So pariprashna means submissive, and sevaya means, of course, service. So these two conditions are there. That if you want knowledge, you have to do it approach the spiritual master submissively and say, how can I serve you? And then when the spiritual master sees that we have the right attitude, then he engages us in some kind of service. And when we do that service, he gives the knowledge from within the heart. Divyagyan, read it, Prokashita, as we sing in the morning. So the knowledge is already here, we are pure devotees by nature. So he just, when Krishna sees that actually we are serving the Guru Parampara. As Krishna says, you cannot serve me directly, you have to go through my representative. So that's the system Krishna set up. So when he sees we actually genuinely doing that, then he removes the dust for Chitradava and Madhyama. And then gradually we get more and more knowledge. And this knowledge becomes vijnana, realized knowledge. And that transforms our lives. So that's really the essence of the Guru Parampara system. And how to live in that kind of relationship with the spiritual master. So it should always be, one should never try to exceed, or is that the right word? Never try to take the place of the spiritual master, become better or think oneself better. Prabhupada said one should always be a fool before the spiritual master. One should always be a fool. So whenever one is together with the spiritual master, he's acting like a fool. I don't know anything. And that's why we hear when the spiritual master says it's a snake, and you say, no, it's a wire. So no, it's a snake. And if he says it's a wire, and you think it's a snake, vice versa. So the spiritual master is right. And even if it's not right, he's right. So sometimes we hear also there's mistakes. Prabhupada's language was not perfect in English, to start with. And Prabhupada made mistakes. Prabhupada didn't know anything about everything about anything. But still, he knows what is important to know. And when he says it, there's more to it than just what reaches the eyes. So it can be that it seems to the mundane intellect, it can seem that he has a flaw. There's some mistake here. But as spiritual master, especially in the category or in the quality of Srila Prabhupada, is perfect. Prabhupada is perfect because Krishna is directly working through him. So that's the nature of it. You just see yourself as a fool in front of the spiritual master, even though you think you know better. Okay.
I was just wondering about the relationship, because you said that the Siksha Gurus are many, yeah? The Diksha Gurus one. And then, the disciple only have one Diksha Guru, but he can have many Siksha Gurus. And then it said that because the Siksha Guru often teaches one in the practicalities of spiritual life, and that these persons are also extremely important. But we see also that the responsibility of the Diksha Guru is to take all the sinful reactions of the disciple, and he gives the disciple a spiritual name and change. You know, there are many things in that he gives the disciple and gives him also the Maha Mantra, the Nam initiation.
And second initiation.
But then, for example, my question is, because we can see that there has to be a very sweet teamwork between the temple president, under which the disciples are staying and serving, and then the spiritual master, because many disciples also, they also sometimes just, not maybe intentionally, but they go just and ask the spiritual master, what do you want me to do? And basically the spiritual master just wants the disciple to be happy and happily engaged in some missionary activities of Srila Prabhupada. But sometimes the spiritual master doesn't know the exact situation where the disciple is serving.
He doesn't know him so well as the local authorities does.
The practical applications. Because when I wanted to get initiated, then I said to Ramaswamy, I have heard all your classes now for some years now, I'm sure. And then he said, but I need to know you also. So when we don't live so close to our spiritual master, he may see our heart, that we are sincere, but he may also want to know us as persons.
thing is, in ISKCON today, also our spiritual master have so many disciples, especially your spiritual master, so many disciples. Right? So it's difficult. It's practically impossible for them to know and have a personal relationship with all of them. That's just the situation we are in. So that's why, and I think that's what you're hinting at, that the Shiksha relationship is so extremely important. And that's why we can have many Shiksha gurus. And we can have only one Diksha guru, but we can have many Shiksha gurus. And they will often be, you can have local Shiksha gurus that really get to know you and see you, how you work daily and what you're doing, and really get to know your nature and your personality. And that's very difficult for a spiritual master because he has so many disciples. And he's often living far away. So maybe you see him once a year, maybe not even that. So we are still a relatively young movement, and there's still many improvements to be made. And I fully agree with you, actually. I think that's maybe one of the most important things we can do in ISKCON today, make the proper relationship between the Diksha Guru and the local authorities. So that actually one is connected, because otherwise one can have, and we see that, one can have a spiritual master and be without a spiritual master. Because the relationship is all way out there. He's living in America, or he's living in India, or he's living in Thailand, or whatever. So then it's practically like not having a spiritual master. One is initiated and one is connected like that, but there's no responsibility. That means you can do whatever you want. There's nobody you're really responsible to. And that's dangerous. Because as this little joke goes, that if you have no spiritual master, you have a fool as a disciple. So that's really the situation if you are not directly connected to a spiritual master, meaning practically in daily life. So that's the situation we have, and it's very few communities internationally that have developed that counseling system or Shiksha Guru system. Same.
But sometimes it is also just right there in front of your eyes. Because I remember once you were temple president, and I had a question. I mean, this is a practical example, Turana Swami, and I went the whole way across the Atlantic Ocean, spent tons of money on a flight ticket to give him a letter where I wanted to ask him a personal question. The only thing he said when he read the letter was, "What does Caitanya Chandra says?" It's true.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is very obvious in one sense also.
Yeah. And often we think, yeah. And it's often, we can also be, it doesn't have to in that sense be completely institutionalized. And one can just take the initiative and just have it. It doesn't mean to be like an official thing that you go and please will you be my Shiksha Guru. One can ask like that. But one can also just have the relationship just by asking questions. And one have a person one relates to and asks questions in philosophical topics or even the personal topics. So a person or persons locally one can talk to and get advice from and get help from. So we can all do in our own little local environment, we can all do a lot without it necessarily have to be institutionalized, even though we need to at one point make it like an institution. So we have the council system, because we see the places that actually have that, things are flourishing. And I really emphasize this, because when devotees feel taken care of and have this relationship, and also as you say, it's a way of pleasing Krishna. Because Krishna says this is the way it works. And again, the Diksha Guru system in ISKCON today, again with the problems we just mentioned, then doesn't really work as there's no Shiksha relationship. One is still initiated, but there's no Shiksha relationship. And Shiksha is actually more important than Diksha. It's even more important because now we need that kind of relationship. It's of course important to get initiated, and it's important, okay, he takes away our karma and all these things. But Shiksha is very practical, you can use it in your daily life. In that sense, it's even more important.
I was just thinking about like practically when you are in action, in service, engaging the mind. I was just thinking like for Sankirtan I often try to like focus, okay, now I should get fixed up and try to please